the story of the morning, which is, of course, President Trump, who is in the UK. President and Prime Minister just held a joint news conference this hour. Let's get to some of the highlights. Jeff Cutmore in London with the latest. Morning, Jeff.
Hi, Sarah. Well, I should just point out I'm outside Chequers, which is the Prime Minister's country residence, which is about 40 miles west of London. The President has now left, heading towards Windsor for tea with the Queen. But I think he's left behind a little bit of confusion because, as you know, he gave an interview with the Sun newspaper where he appeared to be very critical of the Prime Minister's handling of the Brexit negotiations. You saw none of that in this press conference. Indeed, he talked about the higher special relationship between the UK and the United States. Let's just hear what the President said.
Once the Brexit process is concluded and perhaps the UK has left the EU, I don't know what they're going to do, but whatever you do is okay with me. That's your decision. Whatever you're going to do is okay with us. Just make sure we can trade together. That's all that matters. The United States looks forward to finalizing a great bilateral trade agreement with the United Kingdom. This is an incredible opportunity for our two countries, and we will seize it fully. We support the decision of the British people to realize full self-government, and we will see how that goes. Very complicated negotiation and not an easy negotiation, that's for sure.
So just to wrap up that issue, I think number 10 Downing Street will be very happy with the President's parting comments. It does appear that the prospects of a trade deal with the United States are still very much on the table, in spite of his dislike of how the Brexit talks are going. I will just mention several other touch points. He talked about the need for a common defence approach, and that was one area where both leaders very much saw eye to eye. And there were a number of questions around his upcoming visit to Helsinki to meet with President Putin. I think on that issue as well, both Theresa May and President Trump put out a strong line on how that meeting with President Trump is likely to go. So just to wrap up here, we had a press conference where both leaders stood side by side, and to all intents and purposes, you would imagine that that Sun interview and all those negative comments had never existed. Back to you, Sarah.
Absolutely. Jeff Cutmore, thank you very much. In London for us, the highest level of special. That's how I think of our relationship, David. But I guess the investor takeaway is the trade deals are still going to be on, despite some questions around how Prime Minister Theresa May laid out her Brexit plan.
Right.
And that for those that were worried about the relationship and the president's more inflammatory comments toward the Sun, don't worry about it, because it actually sounded like he apologized to her.
Yeah, and Trumpese, at least, it's sort of his way, potentially. They have a great relationship. I don't know if you heard that.
Yes, the highest level of special.
Right, which I'm glad we do too.
Yeah, we do.
By the way, I would add, though, at the very end, he did come back to one of his other favorite topics, which is tariffs on automobiles, tariffs from the EU, that $151 billion number. Remember, he tweeted about it last week, but actually changed it to $1 million. It was a mistake. But the $151 billion trade deficit with the EU, those comments, I think, need to be watched closely, as we always do, because of that potential threat of 20% tariffs on automobiles coming from the EU, and certainly no love lost for Germany. He continually comes back to this pipeline. Right. And, from an economic perspective, that prospect is the one that you've said many times is the one that would worry you the most.
That's the Achilles heel.
In terms of a trade war.
What, the autos?
Yes.
Yeah, because that's a very big part of every country's economy. And you can combine the CPI yesterday with a little slower lending, come up with a stagflation thesis. That's what people do. I don't think it's necessarily right, but that's what people do. And then you add into higher tariffs on cars that are very, let's say, we all know about, that we see on the road. We say, you know what, this is visible, not the $60 number, which was important in a very well-reasoned New York Times piece today. So, yeah, I mean, look, there are a lot of negatives here. A lot of ways to craft a negative story is the way I would put it. I don't, Michael, listen to you closely. You always point out what the facts are versus necessarily what people are saying.
Sure. I mean, I do think it's a lot of anticipatory anxiety based on the what ifs of if all this is in place and nothing changes and we get this inflationary spike or trade disruptions and all the rest. But autos, it's the biggest retail sector, it's the biggest manufacturing sector, and you can't just move the production around, right? So it just initially at least, it's just like, oh, lots of taxes on the biggest category in the economy. And that's why I think, maybe it is the one that we have to worry about. I mean, the idea of, getting a trade deal with the UK bilaterally is great, but that doesn't happen within an investor's time horizon here.
No.
They got to leave the EU. We got to hammer out a deal. I mean, that's just kind of, that'd be nice when it happens, but that's
with all the
nothing for us.
anxiety, the Dow's heading for its best week in a month.
Yeah.
So is that a reflection of the fact that they don't expect the auto tariffs to go through despite the other escalations?
No, I think it's
prospect of $200 billion additional tariffs on China.
Well, I believe that there are two fundamental theories that I don't like. One is that there are no winners in a trade war. That's completely false. If you have to set up a joint venture with MickeyMouse.com in China in order to be able to move in, MasterCard aligns itself with Mickey Mouse. I mean, anything can happen. With Black Cat Foods, I don't care. You change those joint ventures and the intellectual property theft, that is not something to be trifled with. So I believe there can be winners. And number two, I think that we're winning.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.